The topic of magic, witchcraft, it fascinates many. People who are at the top, in power, they are the same people as you and me. A little smarter, more informed, more strict, stronger internally. But this does not mean that they are not interested in magic and all the accompanying elements, cards, or some tricks. At one time, by the way, Leonid Ilyich Brezhnev, our General Secretary of the Soviet Union, was also fond of it. He did not feel it. And Queen Elizabeth, his girlfriend, was also fond of it. In the 70s, it was somewhere in the mid-70s. Our rulers were fond of the topic of healers. And I remember then in Russia, since it was in Moscow, and I do not know how in other corners of our country, but in Moscow there were just conversations about healers. Our General Secretary, Leonid Ilyich Brezhnev, was also fond of this topic. We saw that he had big health problems at some point. But already in the late 70s, health problems began. Therefore, of course, he was also interested in healers. And then the Kremlin was also interested in healers for him. Who are healers? But heal from the word heal, right? People's healer, performing surgical operations without the use of any tools, by simply inserting the hand into the inner human flesh and pulling this unnecessary thing out of there. Yes, the unnecessary thing that causes pain to a person. The activity of healers is not recognized by modern medicine. Of course, the mechanism of impact on a patient is assumed to be similar to the action of a placebo, and the apparent surgical penetration is similar to charlatanism. They think so. Is that so? But Leonid Ilyich Brezhnev decided to send a whole delegation from the Kremlin. A whole delegation from the Kremlin was sent to investigate how it really is. Those manipulations that healers do. The delegation went. The doctors, of course, the military went. Military doctors go to any delegation or commission that goes to investigate something. But Leonid Ilyich Brezhnev sent his nephew, from himself personally, in order to trust or not to trust the military, you see. If he sent his nephew, you understand how strong the trust was to doctors and the military. Borya Belyak went. My friend, my acquaintance, by the way, my first fiancé, Borya Belyak. He went there with this delegation. He knew English perfectly well, and accordingly, he had no problems communicating with the entire environment that was there, unlike our doctors and military, who did not speak the language. And Borya told me, I'm telling you this firsthand, he was present at every such operation. Several operations were carried out in their presence, and all the operations looked pretty normal. They did not look like charlatanism. None.
That is, all the operations took place as it was described.
As the locals who constantly turn to healers say. I must say, they were invited to the Kremlin, but this experience of being invited to the Kremlin was not a success. Why? Because they work in their environment. Their whole environment helps them perform those actions.
It nourishes them.
It gives them energy, and they work through their energy. And what Boris Belyak confirmed the truthfulness of the healers and how they work. This is absolutely true. What conclusions the military and doctors made officially. He said that he did not go there anymore. He was not interested. They have their own work, and he has his own. By the way, later he went as a representative of the Soviet Union to UNICEF. This is also part of the United Nations, but in New York, where we also met again, befriended, worked together. He is in UNICEF, and I am in the United Nations. As for the rituals of others, who are not healers, just for fun, but the rituals of the Buddha, to which all of us are subject. From top to bottom. The bottom is clear, but the top is even more fascinating. And they are looking for the strongest Buddhists, wizards, shamans, to turn to them. This is definitely a conversation about power. This is definitely a fulfillment of a desire to the lower world, never to the upper world. In the upper world, few people are allowed. But in the lower world, yes, through sacrifice. What is Buddha? This is blood, this is sacrifice. Today, a minister of foreign affairs, Lavrov, travels a lot in African countries. As far as I understand, he is concerned about his own place, the place of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Well, others also travel with him, people who simply are not shown in the official delegation. This is what Prigozhin does. The whole African continent is under him. Any sorcerer. He supplies sorcerers. All the rest, as you understand, members of our government. Therefore, they are all tied to him. They are all obliged to him. At some stage, they were fond of shamanism. Our northern shamanism. At that time, Palpalich Borodin brought shamans to the Kremlin. On this wave, Palpalich Borodin came to Moscow and worked in the Kremlin. Probably due to the very effective work of shamans. I am also familiar with one of these shamans. Well, where, in fact, friends, I tell you all this, just from personal experience. She worked in the Kremlin, then they worked in Switzerland, because they were also invited to work in Switzerland. We were friends with her for quite a long time, and of course, I know some shamanic things from her, because she is, so to speak, from the old shamanic circle. In shamanism, this is very important. That is, you are not a newly baked shaman. Newly baked shamans are not very much approved by the old traditional ones, who have genetically inherited their shamanism, and they are really people who work with energies on the basis of their family and on the basis of the energy of their land. They can work effectively only in their environment. And the shaman also, she left Moscow, she said, I have nothing to do here. She did not live in Switzerland. She is not interested. She did not live in Moscow. She went to Yakutia to her. Where did Palpalich bring them from? You see, you never know how, by what means, you can come to the Kremlin and be the third person in the Kremlin, the head of the Kremlin. This is a big position. If someone thinks this is a head of the Kremlin, yes, like a cook. What powers does a cook have? Yes, the greatest. Every oligarch would have such powers. They just dream about it. And the cook has them. Prigozhin also had them.
So did Palpalich and Borodin.
They had the same great powers. May God give everyone, but not everyone is given. This is the head of Paul Palach. This is his mind. This is his creativity. It played its role here. I'm not talking about some kind of presentation of diamonds or something else. This is already accompanying. You go to visit with a bottle of wine, with a cake, with pies. Yes, you visit with a box of sweets. But Paul Palish came with his pebbles. This is a normal phenomenon, friends. There is nothing like that here. He comes from Yakutia. And what is Yakutia? A country of diamonds. There are many things, friends, that a person suddenly finds on the surface. We don't know why. We will think it over. We will wrap up all sorts of interesting thoughts in our heads. Every head works, especially how educated, how smart it is, how much the head works, friends. Therefore, sometimes, of course, there are very funny comments. But this is already on the conscience of every person. Due to his mind, he writes his comments. As for international presidents, prime ministers, yes, everything is the same. Fidel Castro, Cuba, my love, the island of the sanguineous dawn, and the island of the Buddhists. But voodoo, this is their island, this is their land. They did it all as best they could, in the highest order, the Buddhists. Crimea does the same. The Buddhists were brought from Zimbabwe. These Buddhists are such big wizards. But they didn't conjure, they brought a woman with them, necessarily a woman. Sometimes a man, but this is an old man. And what you see on the surface. The advisors of Mogilev were Buddhists. The advisors of Akshanov were Buddhists. They kept them on a donation. That is, a lot of money was spent on them. They paid a huge amount of money to the Buddhists, but they designated it as advice to the factory, especially from Zimbabwe. There is no water there, but the advisors were from Zimbabwe, the advisors on water, to look for water in Crimea. Water, not voodoo. Yes, they were looking for water. The Buddhists from Zimbabwe. That is, this is what the power is based on voodoo rituals. Well, that's why it is such a power. It is bloody, evil, corrupt, merciless, without any humanity to the population. Because, well, the population is what it is. Their chickens are on the slope. The sheep are also on the slope. I told you about one ritual that took place in the Kremlin in March, on March 8th. I told you about how the Kremlin summoned a hairy figure and how he jumped on the Kremlin wall. There may be a separate story about this, and so look for it. I have it. But it is not allocated separately, but somewhere among the same stories as today. I want to tell you about Clinton, about this family. You will notice that the husband has gone into disrepair. The president, and Madam Clinton is still on the surface. She does not take anything, even if she had some diseases. Somewhere she fainted, somewhere else. Maybe she did not take the right pills. It does not matter. She is at the top. She is. But the power has risen. It is a lifeline. They cannot do without it.
The money is gone, but there is no power in power. And so it is necessary to acquire it. How the voodoo ritual works for this. WikiLeaks then exposed Clinton's obsession with voodoo occultism. Of all the places where, presumably, a peasant couple could spend the honeymoon and vacation, the Clintons chose Haiti, the land known by the historical treaty, which it concluded with the forces of voodoo. Haiti concluded a heavenly treaty, or an underground hellish treaty, with the forces of voodoo. As the Washington Post newspaper wrote in 2015, the Clintons went to Haiti in 1975, probably for the money of the Citibank, to take part in the voodoo rituals with David Edwards, the very man with whom the future President Bill Clinton had a 4-hour dinner alone not long before that. the former President Clinton himself wrote that he was a participant in a ceremony in which spirits came, captured a woman and a man. And he also wrote that in one of these dark rituals, the woman repeatedly shouted a speech, then grabbed a live chicken and bit off its head. He brought the chicken to the victim to prevent impeachment. There is no doubt that the Clintons saw in 1975 the strong occult forces that they could use to help them come to power, to become one of the most important political dynasties in the world, as it happened later. The Washington Post newspaper itself wrote that one of the lessons that Clinton extracted from Haiti was that the Lord acts in a mysterious way and that his trip to the tropical island state of the Caribbean inspired him to make the first successful attempt to run for political office before starting to run for office. Well, first of all, they signed their marriage, so to speak, with a contract. Voodoo, of course, a chicken with a beheaded head. And secondly, they also fixed their future, that is, their policy for the future, with the voodoo ritual. It is also known that the Clintons attended voodoo ceremonies every time they felt that their status or position was under threat. In 1998, as reported in well-known circles, one of the reasons for the overthrow of Mr. Clinton, president of Haiti, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, was due to the powerful grip that the Haitian priest held over Clinton's psyche by means of voodoo. You see, yes, what actions? This can be done on every person. Every person is available, but only with a very strong ritual. Recently leaked emails from WikiLeaks seem to indicate that for the Clintons, their trips to Haiti were more than just a vacation in order to make a profit. That the woman who could become the next leader of the free world is not a Christian, but instead believes in witchcraft and sacrifice of animals, and perhaps other living creatures. We are not talking about that. We are talking about Christianity. But if you remember, Patriarch Kirill befriended June, who treated the same general, Secretary Leonid Ilyich Brezhnev, in a completely different way. June with her, in a completely different dialogue. Not at all the one that is preached in the church by Kirill. Will we condemn them? But only for double standards. Not for the fact that they do it. 100% of the leaders do it. But 100% of the leaders do such things. Witchcraft, shamanism, voodoo. They all do it. At one time, I communicated with Yevgeny Nasterkenko, who later became the governor of the Primorsky territory. Yevgeny Nasterkenko had 2 wizards. When we met. No, not at the first meeting, of course. Probably at the third. Yevgeny Nasterkenko invited his wizards to look at me. There was some prince from Moldova. And a man from the tribes that once inhabited the Far East. A local guy, a young wizard. How strong they were, I can't tell you. But I didn't communicate with them. Only I know that they were afraid of me. I tell you, before Yevgeny Nasterkenko became the governor of the Primorsky Krai, he turned to shamans and sorcerers. The shaman was a local guy from the shamanic tribe, and the sorcerer was Prince Moldavsky. You see, he became the governor. They told such little things, maybe not so little things, but they sat and conjured on the Kremlin, these two guys. Yes, they did their business. I suppose, if everything is fine, they should be friends with Yevgeny Nostratenko now. Yes, Yevgeny had quite big plans for life, and I must say, even when he was removed, he didn't even have an order. He sat in the cabinet of the governor. There was no order about his appointment. It was a bluff. The order was signed 2 months later, after Yevgeny sat in the governor's chair. But he had the strength of spirit, and, moreover, he was a shaman. And the guy who sat before him, he was just an intelligent boy from a good Moscow family. Of course, this is not his land, because Yevgeny Nostratenko is from the region. It was not so important and interesting to me what kind of city he was, where he was, what kind of director of the plant he was, and so on. He worked with silver, there was a silver mine. And, of course, there was money to pay. This is understandable. But Pavel Borodin with his sweets from the mine, and Yevgeny Nostratenko with his silver sweets from another mine. This is our country. You can't make it up on purpose. My conversation today is about all the rulers go up through witchcraft. What religions are we talking about today? About Christianity, about Islam. What are we talking about? If every ruler stands in the church, puts a cross on himself, manually, right? And then? Well, who forbids him to continue communicating with shamans and doing what they do? I must say, shamanism and witchcraft are real. And these are not the old women who are somewhere in the villages. Those old women are strong, very strong. They sit still, they don't move anywhere. And those who are already bound by the Kremlin, tied with ropes on their arms and legs, it's harder for them. And it's much harder for them to work. An interesting topic, right? Write what you know. About which sorcerers, who, where, when and with whom they worked. I'm also interested. I'm telling you about my experience in life, and you tell me about yours. I'm Tanya Karatsuba, Sideburkin. September 30th, 2023.